beyond that, I do just want to briefly kind of talk about, what Marvel can maybe learn from this being their first Spotlight series and from this being their first TVMA series, and just kind of go through some of the things that work, and then maybe some of the things that still need improvement as we do move forward and we see more of these shows come about. Allegedly, the Wonder Man show that they're working on with Yahya Abdul-Mateen is going to be the second Spotlight series. I've read that is supposed to be somewhat of a meta contextual type of show that examines like superheroes in Hollywood and just like what we've been dealing with. Maybe akin to The Boys. I'm not sure if it's going to go after the graphic tone of The Boys, but maybe the spirit of that, how it's really examining superheroes in a present day society. But we do know about Daredevil Born Again. That'll be another TVMA show, I'm pretty sure. Even Deadpool as a movie is going to be rated R. So Marvel is getting into more mature projects, and they're also still playing with these different formats as well, whether it's special presentations, which may or may not still be a thing, not sure. Spotlight shows, which are going to be sort of their separate corner at this point in time. So from a television format perspective, from a miniseries format perspective, what would you say you feel like are things that work or maybe don't work with this particular experiment? Because so far, a lot of their shows have mostly been miniseries. Technically, the only ones that have gotten multiple seasons have been Loki and What If. So far, they're telling these one-off stories and kind of going from there. Do you think that that's working for them? Do we need to get into more serialized, multi-season stories moving forward? What say you about just sort of that choice from a creative perspective?
Uh, Man, so I think as a TV show, as that experiment continues to unfold, I mean, I think it's very obvious that a lot of us still feel very underwhelmed by what Marvel is doing on that front. There is simply not enough there in almost every single show we're watching. Even us, as we just talked about Echo, there's an episode that feels like a filler. You have 5 episodes. Why does this feel like a filler? And because that feels like that, part of me is starting to think like, do we want spotlight shows, or maybe even should we start considering spotlight movies? Is that special presentation, is that the same thing? Because part of me does feel like if you shave some of that stuff off of this, it might not have been so bad. Or of course, some of the weird choices they make too, I think, with everything we talked about. But if you shave some of that stuff off, like you said, same length as Killers of the Flower Moon, make this thing an hour 45. Could they have made this a decent story to tell? And I think that could be an experiment in itself. And I'm wondering, I'm curious if that's something they need to continue to experiment with, or if that's something they could have learned from all of this. Is really a lot of it is just the timing of things. 5 episodes already sounded weird. You talked about at the top of the episode, it was 8 at one point. Then they talked about 6 and ended up being 5. And I'm like, well, where's all the content? And part of me thinks they wanted to, of course, they did all 5 episodes at once, not only for all the obvious reasons, but to just get this out, because they're like, okay, this is our old way of thinking about TV shows, and we've already done it. Let's just get it out the window. Hopefully, everything that comes after this is the new showrunner, is the new showrunner kind of formula of things. And so I think, man, I think it's still not working. I think there is something there. I think limited series can be a thing for them, but either every time we get here, there's always too much that we can't. There's not enough time to talk about it, or there's too much time to talk about it. They have yet to find a medium ground, really, unless, again, we're talking about a WandaVision or a Loki, one of those shows that do feel better. Unless you're talking about those shows where I feel like they've come to a conclusion that feels good for them. And so, again, all I know is overall, right, what they're doing right now is not working. And so maybe they do find something that works for them. But this limited series one-off thing just isn't working for them at the moment. And again, it might not even be necessarily all in the what's the ins and outs of things. It might not be just the amount of episodes in time. There might be some other problems that's happening in here that's making it like this. And so it's just something they need to figure out. But I to be honest, I still can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with miniseries, limited series. I love them. I think that there's obviously excellent ones out there. So far, that's mostly what they've leaned into with their shows. And I think the issue is that we don't always have a clear direction as to whether or not that's the case. Like, we just don't even know sometimes if this is constructed
Mhm.
as a limited series or if this is intending to launch something that'll be a little bit more long form, long running over multiple seasons or multiple years. You know, we talked a lot about Loki and how they knew from the onset that was going to be a 2-season show, and they constructed it that way, and we left off with season 1 knowing that season 2 was coming. Hell, you even go over to the other side of the
Mhm.
company with Lucasfilm. Andor constructed the same way. They knew that they wanted to do 24 episodes of Andor, split it over 2 seasons that were going to be split by a couple of years of production, and tell that story in two separate chapters. And I think that that just makes a world of difference in how we perceive a show and how we react to it and how we think about it. And just, you know, the opportunities that exist
Mhm.
for how you can tell that story over a little bit more time. And, you know, with Echo, if it was always meant to be a one-off, fine. But in that case, then yeah, we kind of need to see everything that you have at your disposal to make this like worth it for however many episodes is going to be. In the 5 that they put out, it's just like there's clearly more here that got cut out that you all, you know, felt that just, I
Mhm.
guess, wasn't presentable or it wasn't coherent enough. I don't know what the reasons are, but for whatever reason, we have not seen it. And that's a missed opportunity because there is more there that should have been seen and should have been done from a development and character and narrative perspective, but we just don't get any of that. And so there's a lot to still figure out from that perspective. I've been a champion saying that Marvel needs a tentpole show that we know is going to come back for multiple seasons. They need that. They need a
Mhm.
show that we can rely upon and say, like, we know we're going to get at least 3, 4, or 5 seasons of this show, of this property. I think that that's
Yeah.
essential and key. Like, why not have something like that that is going to exist in the television space for multiple years, and so we can develop a relationship with. Every other network does it. Every other streaming service does it. Like, we know that shit from the get go.
Yep.
Shows get renewed and canceled all the time. We know that stuff immediately. We ask those questions immediately. Is this going to get renewed? Is
Mhm.
this going to come back? And we can't ever do that because we just don't know. They don't tell us these things because they are so secretive about everything. The other thing I do want to ask about though is the exploration of just like other places and other cities and other worlds. You know, I just said New York has been the epicenter for Marvel in comics and of course now in live action, really in all media. But because there are so many characters, because we're going to so many different places, a great opportunity is there really with them to showcase other places and other cities and other societies, other things that we just
Mhm.
haven't completely tapped into. And they've done a pretty good job at that. I mean, there's so many new locations and new worlds and all of this stuff, but Tamahaw as a place in Oklahoma, this was super different for Echo because,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a small town, a very, very small community. All the people in her family and in Echo's orbit work within the city. Like her grandmother's the mail person.
Mhm.
Bonnie worked as a paramedic officer for the fire department. Like these are people that know they know everybody that they work with. And Tamahaw is a real place also in Oklahoma. And one thing that I did
Mhm.
love about this show that I do want to give it credit for is the fact that they could go to Oklahoma and film in real locations. Like we're not on sound stages. It's not a
Yeah.
ton of green screen besides the train scene, but a lot of this was like really shot there. You know, there was even like
Mhm.
the Roxxon gas station, which is like a
Yep.
cool nod and maybe they could do something with and there could be bigger
Mhm.
implications. How did you feel about, you know, exploring a new corner and what that can maybe mean for other shows in the future? I mean, another place we haven't spent a ton of time in. We saw it briefly in Falcon and the Winter Soldier was Madripoor. There's so much you can do in a place like that,
Mhm.
right? Or even like other locations in Marvel mythology, other cities, and how they can sort of inform the types of stories that we tell to get us, you know, sort of away from New York for a while and do something a little bit different. How did you feel about what they did with Echo and what that can mean for future stories?
Yeah, it can mean a lot, man. Because, like you said, that really is that has been the New York has been the center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and of course in comics for so long. But there are other parts of the country that need to be used. I think what one thing that Fox did really well with X-Men in general was like putting them in different locations. X-Men was all over the place. They were never just in one spot. And I think shows like this that we do get an opportunity to potentially again get to see a lot of those other places. That's something I think they did well in even Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It was like we weren't in one singular location. We did see Louisiana, we did see Madripoor. You know what I'm saying? There was other places for us to get to, and so I like that Echo was able to go into this small town in Oklahoma and show us what that might look like, because it's not just representation in characters, it's representation in location as well. And I think, and I'm hoping a lot of that will happen more often, because not every character is from New York, not every character operates necessarily in New York, and I think it's okay for a lot of our characters to meet there, but all of our characters don't have to necessarily stay there or be there. And so I was refreshed to know a lot of this was going to be in Oklahoma. It did surprise me a little bit. I just didn't know. I don't know. I just didn't know it was going to take place in Oklahoma. But I was like, okay, cool. We're not going to be necessarily in the streets of New York, and that was a pleasant surprise. So yeah, I'm really just hoping we get into that more often. I'm pretty confident again that when a lot of other projects come out, we won't necessarily spend too much time in New York in terms of just different characters. But I was pretty happy about what they did here with the location.
Yeah. New York is great. It's great. We live here. It's great. But we don't always have to just be here. We can go other places too. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that we got to see just a different corner and do something totally different. A small town that's just not really a reality that we face with the MCU at most points in time. We're often in these big urban metropolitan centers, because
Yeah.
it kind of necessitates that these big grand stories, on this type of scale, these are often like world events, where we see how they're affecting major cities. But whether they're creating a location, a completely fictional place like a Sokovia, or they're pulling from the comics like Madripoor, or using a real life city like we've seen them go to London a lot, or be in New York, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I think going to these different places is really cool. And I'm like really, really ready for this. I thought about this the other day. I'm really, really ready for West Coast Avengers. Like I'm kind of there to like see
Yeah.
that. That's like
Mm-hmm.
one of the best things about the Avengers game is the fact that so much of it is West Coast based. Like we're in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco.
That's true.
West Coast Avengers is like a real
Yeah.
thing. We go to the Grand Canyon. Like that is so much untapped potential that could be great, and Ant-Man can be a big factor there, maybe Incredible Hulk and She-Hulk, because she is in LA. That can be a big thing. Like the West
Mm-hmm.
Coast is just like largely been underutilized outside of Iron Man and Ant-Man in the MCU. And so I'm hoping that we can
Yeah.
also spend a good amount of time there. The last big thing that I want to explore before we wrap up in terms of what they can learn from this spotlight show and maybe some improvements they can make, it's kind of circling back to this more mature era that I think we're entering in. Whether it's TVMA, whether it's rated R, what we saw here and what we've already talked about is that this doesn't totally feel like TVMA. It's a couple of violent action scenes, some drops of blood. Like, yeah, that's going to get you a mature rating, but does it inherently live that way? Does it actually feel like a more mature story? I think the answer is
Mm-hmm.
unequivocally no, but that doesn't mean that the future cannot be that. And so what say
Yeah.
you about what they can do, whether it's examining more criminal underworld types of stories with a kingpin, whether it's examining things that I don't know might not be as family friendly to the Disney brand as traditionally we might associate with them. Like I don't know if they'll ever tap into drugs or prostitution or what. I don't know. I'm just throwing
Mm-hmm.
stuff out there, but that does warrant more mature types of storytelling. And they don't necessarily even have to go to those extreme levels. There's a lot of layers in which you can explore this type of world, from the language to the thematic subjects. But what say you just about what they could probably learn from this show and how they can hopefully apply it to future projects down the line?
Yeah, again, I think this show has random pockets of, oh, this is what a TVMA Marvel could look like. Again, I don't think the show captured that essence completely. I think they left it, in fact, largely off the table. But you said it in your non-spoiler review, where you were saying how there is grittiness in those Daredevil, in Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, but it's not in just like we're out here dropping F bombs. And it's also, to be honest, not even completely in, oh, there's red blood now either. It's like harrowing environment. You know what I mean? It's like trauma.
Yeah.
It's like the real true dark things that can make some of these things TVMA. It's the subject matter that makes these things TVMA. And I'm not sure, and I'm just hoping again, people are talking about it in the ways in which we are, to where they can understand, like, you got to do more than just, you know what I'm saying? You have to paint a picture that's dark. You have to paint a picture that's gritty. You can't just have those small little glimpses of what that is. We have to feel that through the character. And I think again, we get glimpses of that in this show, but hopefully they're like, okay, now we can do that. We can do that more in our next project. Now, Daredevil Born Again, we can do that. So yeah, I'm hoping they learn from things like that, because to be honest, in a lot of ways, they kind of don't have a choice. Like in a lot of the upcoming projects that they have coming up, between Daredevil Born Again, between Blade, and these are like very, I think tonally defining projects. Like those two in particular will definitely propel us in the ways that we need to go. If you're telling us the Defender universe is back and this Daredevil story is about to come back and there's about to be this whole street level thing going on, you got to get that tone right. It has to make sense. And if you're bringing in Blade, which is kind of he's still street, but he's the more supernatural level of street, right? That's more Midnight Suns and what's going on there. You still got to get that tone right. And so really, again, hopefully the glimpses, they're taking the strokes of brilliance and they're painting them more broadly against some of the other projects that are coming up, because to be honest, they kind of don't have a choice, and it's time to get into the nitty gritty. It's time to get dark and real and capture the essence of what TVMA really is about.
Yeah, the subject matter really is it. I mean, yeah, some of these characters you have to go there. You really do. Like even a Daredevil, we talked a lot about the criminal enterprise aspect of it, but a show like Jessica
Mm-hmm.
Jones dealt a lot with sexual assault. You know,
It
that
did.
is a mature
Mm-hmm.
theme, you know, that you can't shy away from it if you want to do it honestly, if you want to do it with integrity. Like it just has to go there, in some respects, not being gratuitous, but doing it in a respectful way that
Right.
acknowledges the severity of the situation. And it's time for it's time for Disney to take those gloves off, you know, and really go there. And again, not just slap on, you know, a few drops of blood, you know, maybe a head splatter here and there. Like that's just not going to cut it. Like I need this to inherently be
Mm-hmm.
a part of the story that you're telling. It almost has to be that way from the conception of it. Like you have to have a creator or a showrunner or a director coming in saying like, this is going to be something that kind of pushes the envelope a little bit. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
going after
Exactly.
something that is speaking to a more adult oriented audience, a more mature audience that can sort of handle the subject matter. And so if they can just lead with that, there's great chances that they can take in the future, and there's great runway and great material that they'll have to work with, because
Mm-hmm.
that opens up so many new characters, so many new ideas, so many new themes that they haven't been able to touch, you know, up until this point. And so I'm cautiously optimistic just based off of what we saw here. I'm still a little bit hesitant to think that they'll really go there, but that being said, Daredevil, just knowing that show is still somewhat under construction, and even bringing a character like Punisher back, which is like, I mean, there's no way to skirt
Yeah.
around that. Like, what
You ain't got no
what are you
choice.
gonna do? Like, come on, he's
What
he's
you gonna do?
he's murdering people in cold blood. That's what he does. So some of those signs, you know, sort of point to the fact that maybe they are dipping the toe, and then eventually we're going to dive in head first, which I think they're going to have to do eventually, and just sort of, you know, break that fold
Yep.
and just get into it. And people want it. People obviously like have a desire to see that stuff. Like we can live in these multitudes. We can live with this the variety of content and variety of
Mm-hmm.
tones and subject matter. It'll be greater for them moving forward into the future as they continue to expand and continue to grow.